Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining the latest in the Northern Forest Center's Building the New Forest Future webinar series. I'm Mike Wilson. I'm Senior Program Director with the Northern Forest Center. And today our topic is the state of the recreation economy in the Northern Forest region. We selected this topic because and I think we are not alone in recognizing outdoor recreation as an increasingly important force in the Northern Forest economy. It's a critical factor in business development, resident quality of life, attracting visitors, visitor spending, and new residents, and ultimately creating healthy, vibrant communities. We also acknowledge that it's a complex sector impacted by forces ranging from climate change, changing user trends, visitation patterns, demographics, and community and environmental carrying capacity. These issues are in play across the Northern Forest region, and we see tremendous value in learning, sharing, and strategizing at a regional level. So to that end, we're pleased today to welcome the panelists who are joining us today. Before introducing them, a few quick housekeeping items. First, we'll have individual introductions from our three panelists and then a panel discussion. You can post questions at any time. Please use the Q&A rather than the chat window as you do that. It helps us to manage the questions and keep track of them so we can be sure to field as many as possible. Also, do feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself, share resources with the group, etc. And also just so everyone understands, after the introductions, we have a few questions that we'll tee up with the group to get things going, and then we'll shift over and work to field as many of your questions as possible. So now I am pleased to introduce our panelists. They each will have some slides, but our three panelists are Jackie Dagger, manager of the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative; Janel Lawton, director of the New Hampshire Office of Outdoor Recreation; Carolann Ouellette, director of the Maine Office of Recreation. I also want to acknowledge Laura DeBetta, who's the director of Outdoor Recreation for New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation. She had planned to be here today, but was unable to join us at the last minute. But again, another important and helpful voice in this conversation. So we've asked each of our panelists to provide a brief introduction to themselves, how they became involved in their role, and to get our conversation going. So with that, Jackie, I'm going to hand it to you to introduce yourself and get us started.
All right, great. Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. First, before introducing myself, I just want to thank the Northern Forest Center for bringing us together. Carolann, Janel, and I work a lot together, but we haven't had a chance to speak in the same space yet. So it's really exciting to be here with them and talking about the Northern Forest outdoor recreation economy. So forgive me, I'm going to look off screen. I have a couple of notes, but I'm Jackie Dagger. I'm the program manager for the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, or we call it VOREC for short. And I just wanted to share a little bit with you all about myself before I talk a little bit about the VOREC program by way of introduction. And I won't go through it all, but you see I do have a lot of personal and professional experience working and playing in the outdoor recreation space, both in Vermont and the state of Washington, where I lived for a long time. And I actually started my career in food systems and agriculture, working on a farm and ecology center in Fairbanks, Alaska, and started to get into outdoor recreation while living there. And then when I moved down to Seattle, working in the retail world for REI and the North Face store. And after getting my master's degree from Antioch University, Seattle Center for Creative Change, I started to get into bigger adventures in the mountains. I also was working as a consultant helping municipalities in Washington state to create meaningful outreach and public engagement processes that involved the public in decision-making about things like wastewater and transportation and energy planning, as well as conversations about environmental conservation. And although these things felt unrelated at the time, I found that in the work that we do with the outdoor recreation economy, these things are actually very interconnected. And the foundation that most communities need to support the outdoor recreation economy. Next slide. So that brings me to what I do. And I think to help explain what I do, I need to step back and share more with you about the VORIC program. So the VORIC program was established by Executive Order 1117, which was signed by Governor Scott in June of 2017. And the VORIC program, it is Vermont's Office of Outdoor Recreation, and it's organized a little differently than most other offices of outdoor recreation. And that's because the program works off of a collective impact network. The network is managed primarily through the state of Vermont by the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and works through public partners to move forward landscape scale efforts that advance 5 pillars of work. And those pillars are the scaffolding for the work that we do. And they include grow outdoor recreation related businesses, increase participation in outdoor recreation activities among all demographics, strengthen the quality and extent of outdoor recreation resources, increase stewardship of outdoor recreation resources and environmental quality, and promote and enjoy the health and wellness benefits of outdoor recreation. And you can see a sort of working mission statement for our program and our purpose up on the screen. Next slide. So VORIC exists to strengthen Vermont's outdoor recreation economy, which, like the national outdoor recreation economy, is very broad in its reach. But when we refine that outdoor recreation economy down to its core elements, we see that it's really a collaborative relationship between land, water, air, and wildlife and economy. And looking at the data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, it's really clear why outdoor recreation and outdoor recreation economy is important to Vermont. You can see some of that data up on this slide. And this data was released in the fall of last year and shares information about 2021. And for Vermont, outdoor recreation's impact on our GDP in 2021 was 4.1%. That's the third highest in the country, just behind Montana and Hawaii. And for a small state like Vermont, that is huge. That's really big. The data also showed that Vermont has a 17.6% increase in employment, which really showed the resiliency of outdoor businesses and outdoor organizations at a time when other sectors of employment were really struggling during the pandemic. So again, underscoring the importance of the outdoor recreation economy to Vermont and the work that the VORIC program does to support it. Next slide. And lastly, just to summarize, I'm excited to talk more with Carolann and Janel, but I wanted to flash my contact information up on the screen. If you want to get in touch, I welcome you to reach out. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. Welcome to the conversation. And next, I'd like to introduce and welcome Janel Lawton from New Hampshire.
Hi there, everyone. How are you today? Thank you for having me. And Jackie, what a great introduction. I am going to go a little off script. You've inspired me. So Janel Lawton, Director of Outdoor Recreation Industry Development for the state of New Hampshire. And a little bit about my personal background. When I got out of college, I wanted to work in the ski industry and went right into the ski industry full force. I worked in it for years and really kind of struggled to find my path in the outdoor recreation industry, even though I knew it was my passion. I loved being outdoors and loved playing outdoors. So my career took me many different places. It took me to Chapel Hill working for Performance Bicycles. It brought me back to New England. And I was working in economic development when the opportunity to work specifically in the outdoor recreation industry presented itself. And I jumped on that. So I'm happy to be here today and share with you a little bit about what the state of New Hampshire is working on. Next slide, please. All right, so background about the ORD office. It was established by statute in 2018 and in operation since 2019. I became the director in 2022. And this is important to note because the state of New Hampshire, this office is relatively new to the state, as it is for Vermont and Maine, although they were on board a little bit quicker than New Hampshire. But our efforts are kind of step in step, and we like working together and collaborating on very similar initiatives. Our 4 guiding principles in the state are very similar to Maine's and Vermont's. We focus on economic development, on education and workforce training, conservation and stewardship, and public health and wellness. Next slide, please. All right, so why is this important? The outdoor recreation economy is a big contributor to the GDP, as Jackie noted. And what does this mean for the state of New Hampshire? Well, the BEA, the federal BEA in 2021 reported that the outdoor recreation industry impacted New Hampshire with over 28,000 direct jobs, which created 1.2 billion in wages and salaries, adding 2.7 billion to the outdoor recreation value added. And I've listed some of the top value adding activities here. And what's really cool about these activities is they can really be found from border to border throughout the state of New Hampshire. And it just shows the diversity of New Hampshire, which we share with Maine and Vermont as well. And next slide, please. All right, so this is kind of just recapping here how the state of New Hampshire sees the outdoor recreation economy, and that it is it's different from travel and tourism and parks and rec. It is really focused on the economic activity of these outdoor activities. And again, noted here are the 4 areas that we look to support to help the outdoor recreation economy thrive. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Janelle, and welcome. And next we'll bring it over to Maine and welcome Carolann Ouellette, Director of the Maine Office of Outdoor Recreation.
Thank you so much, Mike. Happy to be here with my colleagues, Janelle and Jackie. This is great. I appreciate the opportunity. So I have a few more slides, but I'll go through them quickly. And if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. So again, in following Jackie and Janelle, a little bit of background for me. I came at it, and this is what's really interesting about this industry. I came at it a little differently. I have a degree in hotel management and went from there to become a rafting guide, helped manage a whitewater rafting company, went from there to Sugarloaf, worked for a ski resort and managed some lodging property there, continued on the journey to opening my own restaurant. And from there, actually ended up at the Office of Tourism. So I was the director of the Maine Office of Tourism for a number of years, left that to run Maine Hudson Trails. And then when there was the push to create an Office of Outdoor Recreation here in Maine, I was invited to apply and help get that off the ground. So here I am. So an avid outdoor enthusiast myself. I like to say I love it all. I don't know that I necessarily excel in any of it, but I will be out there on the landscape trying something new every day if I can. So certainly that has helped. I think that has helped with the energy that's behind the office and the ability to build partnerships, which you'll hear is really important. So next slide, please. So there's incredible opportunity. And I think this is why we're here today, but I'll go through a little bit of it, how it relates to Maine. Next slide, please. Again, as Jackie and Janel both noted, we do use the Bureau of Economic Analysis numbers as a basis for just stating the importance of outdoor recreation to Maine's economy. We are, thankfully, the New England states actually, this is really important to all of us. Jackie mentioned Vermont is third, Maine is fifth as far as how much outdoor recreation contributes to our GDP compared to other states across the nation. And, you know, this continues to grow. And I think you saw that in Jackie's slide. We saw an increase in, we saw quite a good increase in GDP, about a 19% increase 2020 to 2021. And we continue to see jobs increase as well. Next slide, please. So brief history, Maine Outdoor Brands, our state business alliance formed ahead of the Office of Outdoor Recreation. So Maine Outdoor Brands was founded in 2017 by a group of retail and product manufacturing companies primarily, and it has since grown to include outdoor product service and retail companies, along with a number of nonprofit organizations that facilitate an outdoor experience for so many different communities. The Maine Office of Outdoor Recreation, created in 2018, we were the 10th in the US, and we joined the confluence of states in 2019. Next slide, please. So basically our job is my job, I'm a single person office as well, is to grow the outdoor recreation economy, build the brand, so really leverage the outdoor recreation heritage that Maine has. So we look at very similar pillars, look at economic development, integrating outdoor recreation into that, look at helping facilitate outdoor recreation marketing and research across the various state agencies and partners, promote health benefits, but truly the distinguishing piece is we become a central point of contact for outdoor recreation issues, for trends, and for the industry overall. Next slide, please. So our work in Maine, the next slide, please. We really work on a partnership model. We focus on networking, innovation, access, stewardship, career exploration, and as I mentioned, collaborative marketing. We work very closely with Maine Outdoor Brands, building opportunities for companies to reach different markets. We work with the Recreation Economy for Rural Communities. So far in Maine, those have been Freiburg and Bangor. And then you can see a number of the other places and organizations that we share work, just a small list of some of the ones that are partners in our work. And next slide, please. And I think one of the great successes we've had is the Outdoor Economy Summit, which we launched with Maine Outdoor Brands, Maine Marine Trades. This year, Maine Trails Coalition is involved in this work as well. And so that launch has really sort of been the coalescing of all the work and bringing together so many of the different partners and stakeholders. And I will leave it there.
Great, thank you. Sorry, it took me a second to get off mute, but I think with those introductions, I invite all of our panelists to turn your cameras on and join us on the screen, and we'll dive into our conversation. So again, thank you all for those excellent introductions. And actually, the first question that we had teed up may be a smidge redundant, but we'll put it out there anyway and open it up a little bit further. But I'd love to hear from each of you a little bit more maybe on why the focus on outdoor recreation is important to the state's economies. I think you all had some statistics in terms of kind of order of magnitude impact. But just curious if you have additional thoughts, and maybe in particular thinking about, because all of you I know work at a statewide level from a Northern Forest Center standpoint, and our regional work. We tend to be focused on the more northern, more somewhat rural, remote parts of the states. So I'd be curious if you have any additional thoughts that you would want to share on why this particular focus on outdoor recreation is particularly important in each of your states and for the Northern Forest region.
Sure, I'll jump in, really to echo what my colleagues have said, and to state that it's really important, you know, to our state, each of our individual states' economy into the Northeast. We thrive on outdoor recreation. And Carolann spoke very well about the level of partnerships it takes to make this work happen. I think that's really important as we look for growth in the outdoor economies, and especially in the Northern Forest, in those rural communities, and raising the level of collaboration and networking that and resources that we can bring to these rural economies to help them grow.
Can jump in following Janelle. And yeah, I completely agree with you, Janelle. The partnership building opportunities that are presented through working on outdoor recreation economy is huge. Outdoor recreation, I think we were all reflected, is really broad and touches a lot of different areas of economy and community life. And I think in the Northern Forest, specifically, a lot of our communities are rural. A lot of our communities are thinking about how to develop sustainably, and I think with the environment in mind, and living sustainably with the environment. And I think developing outdoor recreation economy for rural communities in a way that helps them develop, but also is true to like stewardship and conservation, especially in the Northern Forest, is a really big opportunity that outdoor recreation economy presents.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, and I don't know that it'll be necessarily different, but you know, you think about outdoor recreation. So one, it actually drives commerce, but it's first and foremost is dependent upon the lands and waters. And I think that's what's so important in the context of the Northern Forest. You know, we know that investment in the basic infrastructure definitely provides long-lasting dividends. Preserving that access is imperative to enhancing economic and social impact. And then, you know, that access ensures sort of the quality of life and Americans' ability to get outside, where jobs, health, and communities grow. So when you think about communities that invest in those outdoor recreation infrastructure assets, definitively, I mean, there's research that support it, you know, help attract residents, help retain residents and workers, and also help attract businesses. So that's proven to really enhance rural economies. And then I think, you know, the public health piece is something that we all talk about. And I know I haven't even sort of gone into that as much as I probably should as far as my role at the Office of Outdoor Recreation, but there's savings there. I mean, there are other states that have done studies that show the more active and the more access you can provide and increase participation, that you actually, you know, will actually result in public health savings.
Well, and just that's great. And to bring it in a little bit more granularly, I wonder if you can each potentially share a couple examples of areas of work, and kind of you may have just pointed to one, examples of really promising opportunities in the outdoor recreation economy space, just to kind of bring it down a little bit, so to understand really some of the specific things that you all are looking at and excited about. I'm not going to call on anyone. I will ask you to.
I mean, I can jump in. I think, you know, certainly from my perspective, working with Maine Outdoor Brands and looking at small business support, and in particular entrepreneurial support. So thinking about innovation and early stage businesses and emerging businesses, we're finding in Maine that many of those entrepreneurs are active outdoor enthusiasts, and it's because of their time in the outdoors that they're creating new products or launching new products or starting new businesses. And, you know, that's one of the biggest areas of growth we've seen is actually in product manufacturing. but also quite honestly in guiding. Guiding saw one of the biggest rebounds since the pandemic in Maine. And I think the ways we can all work together to help those businesses grow, find new markets, and continue to support them is a true opportunity, because some of that's happening in rural communities, some of it isn't, but it all certainly has a positive effect.
You can go next. I think the opportunity that comes to mind for me is highlighting outdoor recreation as critical infrastructure for communities. We were talking about health and wellness, and I think things that we're doing in Vermont with the VORIC program are really working through partners, through the work that we do to highlight the importance of outdoor recreation and strengthen the partnerships that help create those opportunities and build sustainable experiences. And so I think, really focusing on outdoor recreation as critical infrastructure for all communities, and how do we fund municipalities at the local level to invest in those outdoor recreation assets and experiences for their residents, for their visitors. We run a community grant program, and looking at what other ways we can start to support outdoor recreation being that critical infrastructure, as much as, say, a community hospital.
Janel, do you
Sure,
want
and
to
I'll just, add on, it all starts at the top and comes down. And we saw that with the pandemic. We saw all of our states just getting inundated with visitors. And then how we as federal entities and state entities managed that and moved forward through that was really a critical junction point. Because it shined a really big light on the northern forest. It really showed everyone the importance of our forests and our communities in these forests, and the need to have that outdoor recreation infrastructure really well supported. So now we are seeing that we're getting that support through our state governments, through the federal government, and it's coming into our communities through funding, through capacity resources. So, those are still more general examples, and you can pull out any one specific example, whether it's, one community that's excelled and grown. I can, share with you a half dozen off the top of my mind, but workforce is a big piece of this too, as we are looking forward and figuring out how to make this a sustainable industry. We're developing workforce programs in each of our states, that will support the growth of this outdoor economy and allow us to kind of move forward and grow in a sustainable way.
Great. And this kind of builds on this, but yeah, a number of you have referenced other partners. I think we all know that in each of the states there are departments of conservation, there are departments of fish and wildlife, there are tourism offices, there's Department of Labor, Department of Transportation, all of whom touch on some of the issues that we're talking about here. Just curious if you could speak a little bit to the importance of having your offices, a dedicated office of outdoor recreation, and the niche that your offices play in that ecosystem of other organizations, whether those be state agencies or other nonprofit for-profit businesses, but how you see the importance of the niche there for each of your offices.
Yeah, I'm going to just jump in real quick and say that the outdoor recreation offices are strategically placed in government to be collaborators, conveners, coordinators across the outdoor recreation industry, which includes other state agencies, and we all play a different role. But what the outdoor recreation industry economy, that's our role. That's for us to come in and have a voice for that sector. And to provide a path for non-government entities to have access to government.
Oh, sorry, Jackie.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Carolann. I'll go after you.
Yeah, I think Janel said it really well, but I would say, you know, Mike, you mentioned sort of departments and agencies and offices that have more specific missions or areas of focus in each of those places. So to Janelle's point, there's really no other state office that's built with a mandate and the expertise to partner with this. I mean, this is an incredibly fast growing industry. So nationally, $862 billion. So we're like the only place that coordinates across outdoor recreation programs, build those partnerships, really to expand the benefits of outdoor recreation and enhance state competitiveness in many ways.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think, you know, it's also looking at how to build those critical relationships between folks who manage natural resources and the economic benefits of that. I think more than outdoor industry, we play this role connecting these two really critical and different worlds. And we're looking for opportunities for how do we leverage those relationships? How do we make the best use of the resources we have? Because as I think you heard in our introductions, we're all one-person teams. But how do we make those connections between partners to leverage those relationships and to benefit both our natural spaces and our economic spaces?
That's great. And Carolann, you just made a reference to thinking about each of the states' competitiveness in this space. And I use that to transition into talking about some of the points of engagement you all have at a national level and what you're seeing in other parts of the country. And you referenced earlier the confluence of states, which I'm guessing many of us are not very familiar with. So I know that's something you've been quite involved with over time. So I'd love to first just ask you to explain a little bit about, you know, what is the confluence of states and its role in the outdoor recreation economy. And then with that as context, ask each of you to speak a little bit about what you're seeing, hearing, learning, observing of things that are going on in other parts of the country. But first, if you can just set the stage so we understand the confluence of states.
Sure. And I actually, Vermont was a confluence member prior to Maine, but
Oh.
it's good. Jackie and Janelle's a member as well, but fill in anything that I miss here. So, I mean, I think in essence, the confluence really becomes the confluence is an alliance of the 16 state members. There's 4 pillars, and those have been mentioned already: economic development, education and workforce, conservation and stewardship, and public health. So really, it's this notion that the economy and conservation go hand in hand. But the confluence itself is this incredibly valuable network of the members. Because the way the network works is we promote collaboration and resource sharing among states. So yes, I just mentioned state competitiveness, but we're really very collaborative and sharing of our resources and knowledge. Members can exchange knowledge and expertise, which all helps us address a lot of the common challenges and achieve common goals, particularly around those 4 pillars. So it provides a forum for member states to share best practices. We share different policy initiatives, and ultimately that idea is to help improve quality of life. And then by working together, it gives us this collective strength to create more awareness around the benefits of focus on the outdoor recreation economy, but it is sort of this wonderful place for us to share and learn. And Jackie and Janel, jump in there.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great summary, Carolann. And I think I would just add that it's been really invaluable to get to connect with other directors, even from across the country, because we're dealing with different experiences on the ground, the West versus the East. But I think what we find is that we're trying to manage through similar challenges most often. How do we balance conservation and outdoor recreation on the landscape? How do we think about emerging trends like electric mountain bikes. And it's been really helpful to think about, how other states are experiencing that, building tools that help them think about those things. And also, just as many of us are relatively new in our role as offices of outdoor recreation, and how do we as offices learn from each other about how we message, how we connect with people, how we connect with the public.
Jackie, thank you. That helps a lot too. I would add, the other piece is so I forgot to mention that the confluence of states, the membership are actually the state directors of each of the states, the 16 member states. But collectively and individually, we also serve as leaders and mentors for other states that are potentially interested in creating these offices of outdoor recreation in whatever form they may take that's best for those states. And the confluence has created a number of resources to help others look at those. So there's one-pagers on each of our offices. There's a guidebook on how to develop an office of outdoor recreation. There's an annual report, and we continue to work on some other projects collectively as well.
Great. Just one quick housekeeping piece. I've just noticed a couple questions come in the Q&A, which is great. I encourage folks to start populating that, so we can kind of sift through those and be prepared to work through some of those questions when we get there. And again, just a reminder that it's best to put the questions, use the Q&A function for posting questions and for us to get into, as opposed to the chat. So again, I guess one quick question for all of you. Do you see, again, my observation is that there's been a big push in this arena in creating these state offices in the last 4 or 5 years. And Carolann, to your point, in terms of supporting other states as they start to move this direction, is your sense that this is continuing to grow, that additional states will be leaning into this and joining that confluence, or you don't feel like it has plateaued? Okay, good.
Yeah, go ahead, Janel.
I'll just note that Massachusetts just brought in an outdoor recreation industry office. So hopefully once they get that position filled, we'll be able to, pull them into the fold of the confluence and support them as they're starting up their office.
Great.
Yeah, there's 19 states at the moment with some form of either policy advisor, office of outdoor recreation. VOREC's a little bit different too. So again, the models vary depending upon the best, suiting the needs best for the state at the time. But we do know there are probably 5, 6, 7 other states at least looking at this, because the reason we know a lot of that is the National Governors Association also formed the Outdoor Recreation Learning Network. And that's another place where any state that has an interest in looking at this as an opportunity can spend time learning from one another as well. So it can be anyone in any sort of department that's interested in this.
So again, continuing the dialogue around what other parts of the country and what's going on in the confluence of states, I'd love to hear each of you speak a little bit to what you're seeing and learning going on in other states, in other parts of the country. And that's, I think, both in the context of things that you see others, challenges that we have here that you see other states really leaning into and developing models that we can learn from. Also things, again, just in some of our, earlier conversations, folks have referenced like, boy, in this part of the country, they're doing X or Y really well. And if we don't, they're getting ahead of us. And again, coming back to that competitiveness question, again, it's a co-opetition, understanding that. But again, I'm just really curious to hear each of you speak a little bit to that set of questions. What are you seeing out there in other parts of the country, either that we can clearly learn from, or that we need to pay attention to from a competitiveness standpoint, or anything else that you're learning?
I can jump in just
Someone needs to.
from Maine's, some of the things that I've seen. So certainly the partnership thing continues to be high on the list for everyone, because even across the nation where some folks do have more than a one-person office now, but it's still very small teams. I would say, when I look out there across the landscape, there's some things. I currently don't operate a grant program, and I know, Jackie, you've got, but one of those things, it would be really helpful for me to be able to, think about what's the mechanism for funding something like a communities grant program, and being able to provide additional funding to support Land and Water Conservation Fund as a match, or some of the other federal programs that are passed through to the states. I look at places where there's strong collaboration, or there's a really strong focus on sort of this notion of incubators and accelerators. So there's a really clear place for outdoor industry businesses to go to grow. And so that for me is something that's really important. But I also think a lot of it, Maine, just the Nature-Based Education Consortium just launched their Outdoor Equity Fund and did their first round of grants. But I think sort of this whole notion of outdoor equity funds and thinking about how increasing participation, what are those programs that help do that? So those are three for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Carolann, specifically that outdoor equity piece and how states are addressing and working on outdoor equity. I think the trend, for lack of a better word, but there are a number of states, starting with New Mexico, who have established outdoor equity grant programs and are making grants that go to engaging more youth in the outdoors, or more of a DEI program focus or land acquisition focused. And that's something certainly we've been looking to here in Vermont. I think also, and Carolann, you mentioned this too, the workforce pathways and how other states are thinking about setting up workforce pathways that support really sustainable opportunities in the outdoor recreation economy, and how we as states support those opportunities and use that as a resident retention or attraction, or attracting new outdoor businesses.
And so in that context, Jackie, understanding that others are kind of leaning into kind of the workforce question. I know it's a big question across a lot of sectors here in the Northern Forest. So yes, they're getting into it. Are you seeing particular strategies or ways that people are doing things that we might learn from in this region?
I would say that, there are really exciting conversations happening through particularly the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. There are a number of outdoor business alliances who are convening with the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, and some universities that are working on thinking about how you set up workforce pathways, how universities and businesses work to identify the needs that outdoor businesses have, and then what programming universities in our states can set up to support the development of those skill sets. And there was a convening, I think just this past winter, out in Oregon, and Oregon State University, I might be getting that wrong, but I think they have and correct me, Janel or Carolann, but I think that they are really leaning into thinking about workforce pathways. How do we set this up, and making those connections? So yeah, some really cool stuff happening. And I know in Vermont, the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, Kelly Altz is our executive director, has been really engaged in those conversations.
And I think to that point, even, you think about the workaround sort of outdoors class, children in outdoor classrooms, but how do you start even going all the way down sort of the backward side of the pipeline, if you want to call it that way, but how do you start getting kids interested? And again, that goes back to making sure that they have access and they understand and appreciate and start to love the outdoors and start to see opportunities even at an early age. But we all are, but working very closely, obviously, with the university, I think to Jackie's point, and connecting the dots between the needs of the businesses and sort of where that programming ends up going.
So in New Hampshire, we've been doing similar work, and the collaboration takes many partners at many levels. And what we are seeing is, in our outdoor recreation communities, that outdoor recreation education needs to be starting at a much younger age. And what we're looking to do is develop those programs in the high school timeframe where they have access to CTC programs that can then transition and over to community colleges and into higher education. So the partnerships that we are collaborating with are, at the high school CTC levels. They're with local businesses who we have local business community members coming in to teach courses. These programs then move on to local community colleges, and we're working with UNH Extension, who has quite a robust outdoor recreation program actually down in Durham. So again, we're looking to understand exactly what those pathways can be, how to get them funded, how to get the capacity piece there, like how can we get people educated and trained in to teach these courses. And a lot of them are quite simple, that you can go out and you can buy curriculums and you can have them put into these CTC programs. But again, it requires funding or it requires resources. So, we're partnering in New Hampshire with many different entities across the state to make this happen. And I think this is a model that looks a little bit different in each state, but has a lot of commonalities throughout. So, you're going to go and find something very similar happening out in Colorado. And the discussions, for example, that we have with our Colorado or Utah colleagues is, how are you getting through these barriers? Like, how do you get over these challenges? What ways have you figured out to work around it? And that's the important networking piece for our offices, to be able to collaborate and share, to be able to move these initiatives forward.
Great. And as you all, again, as you're going about your regular day-to-day business in your states and connecting with other folks in other parts of the country, are you seeing particular trends, emerging trends that you think really have staying power and provide real long-term opportunity for the Northern Forest? And this, and by trends, I'm thinking broadly, this both in terms of activities that you see, where participation is surging, where there's real opportunity if it's done well in this region to capitalize on that, but also kind of that deeper role of outdoor recreation in rural communities from a stewardship and community engagement standpoint. But are there particular trends, opportunities that you see as really promising and that have real staying power and potential for this region? Jackie.
Mike, this might be at maybe a level up from what you're asking us to talk about, but I think I would say an emerging trend really is communities choosing to invest in outdoor recreation. I've mentioned, we've talked about it a couple of times. We have a community grant program. The VORIC program is run through the VORIC program, and we've had 4 rounds at this point, and every round we've seen an increase in applicants. And the last round, we had over 100 communities applying for funding that would help them invest in their outdoor recreation economies and outdoor recreation assets, building marketing plans. So I think just the awareness and interest in investing in outdoor recreation economy is a real trend that we see. And I think along with that is the idea of sustainable destination development as well. You know, how do we build outdoor recreation economy in a way that is sustainable, that invites tourism, but doesn't overwhelm the communities who are investing in these outdoor recreation opportunities.
Yeah, I would build on that. I would say for us, we're seeing more sort of appreciation of the connectivity and the understanding of the need for investment and the opportunity that investment creates for economic development leaders across the state in different areas, particularly rural cities and towns. And I think that destination management piece, you know, Maine just released its destination management plan. That's been a very collaborative effort and critical as probably because of the demands that occurred during the pandemic, and this has been mentioned, the level of, I think, awareness of responsible recreation and the need for stewardship has definitely been elevated, but at the same time, there's so many more people we need to share that message with. So there's that as well, is certainly a trend, that whole notion of sustainability and being good stewards of the lands and waters, and understanding, particularly for us in the Northern Forest, what that means, you know, how important the access is to private lands and how important, you know, keeping the public lands stewarded and maintained as well. So yeah, I think those are all critical.
Yeah, and I'd agree with both Jackie and Carolann in that the communities with outdoor recreation economies are more likely to attract new residents with greater wealth and have faster growing wages than our non-recreation counterparts. So these trends are particularly true in rural counties too. Creating a recreation economy starts with those natural and cultural assets. And then it takes an engaged community. So from there, you can build out a strategic plan for economic growth that will help it be sustainable. So, you know, just kind of that simple pattern is the trend that we're fostering in the state of New Hampshire.
I'll just jump in with another trend, because we've talked about outdoor equity, but I think adaptive recreation within outdoor equity is something that we're seeing. We're seeing a push towards funding in Vermont. I think an awareness of, we want trails that are that everyone can use, and that includes adaptive trails that folks who have adaptive needs can get outside in a way that's equal to someone who's more able-bodied, and so we have seen a lot more investments into building those trails around Vermont, and I think around the Northern Forest too.
I would say this will probably be a whole conversation looking at the time for another webinar, but one of the other pieces sort of tied to that, and because of the demand and the growing investment in infrastructure, in particular in trails, is some of those trail builders, which often are volunteers, are starting to age out a little bit. So thinking long term, how do we continue to maintain and build that infrastructure that has capacity beyond a volunteer base?
So I'm starting to see questions come in in the Q&A. I do have a couple kind of additional questions on my end, but I want to jump in and make sure that we get to some of the questions that are coming up from our audience, and jumping right off on the topic of trails here. Given again, I'm getting into the Q&A piece here now. So given the dependence in all three of these states on recreation on private land, public access trails on private lands, do you all have thoughts about more or alternative approaches to support and incentivize private landowners to maintain and embrace that historic tradition of public access for recreation on private lands.
Well, there's a lot
It's
of
an easy
really
question, so.
Um,
I'm kidding.
yeah, I was gonna say that there's a lot of complicated answers
Yes,
to that
it's
question.
complicated.
I think the easiest thing that we've been leaning into already, and there's more we can do, but I think the easiest thing we've been leaning in, at least initially, is to develop a stewardship ethic. I think one of the reasons we see private property owners close off access the most is because they're concerned about how people recreating on their property are using it. And so investing time into developing a stewardship ethic that encourages people to be aware that they're recreating on private property, and also how to recreate there respectfully is something that I think we've been doing initially. In Vermont, we also have landowner liability protections, which help, but there are also much more complicated questions about current use, changing current use to provide some better incentives. But I think that's a more complex solution that'll take longer.
Yeah, and I'll just, like Jackie said, it's a complicated question, but the states do have liability protection, which is really good. But the next piece is the visitor use management, like that, an education of our visitor users, to leave no trace, to ski kind, to ride with gratitude. A lot of these initiatives that we work with our partners on to really help them understand that having access to private lands is something that we shouldn't be taking for granted. And that we need to be good stewards of the land, and we need to facilitate these conversations and communications with private landowners. We need to get permissions put in place. So, there's not a big downward approach to that right now. It's really coming from the local communities and how they are moving forward those relationships.
Carolann, anything else from your end?
No, I don't think I can add much. It's so critically important to everything that we do. So it really is relationship building. I would add too, for us, is in consideration of how many new residents we've seen since the pandemic, it's as important to get the message out across the state. So yeah, it is absolutely where we can help.
So again, sticking on the trails question for just a minute, and I am breaking the rules, and I'm acknowledging this question that came in through the chat instead of the question Q&A. But can you speak a little bit to I think Carolann, you referenced this earlier. There's a lot of work involved in building trails. Historically, a lot of that work has been volunteer-led in this region. So there are questions there from a sustainability question, but as we're increasingly seeing, as you all have referenced, communities leaning into this and communities building trails. What do you think is, communities need to be able to really produce high quality, sustainable trails? Is it a question of technical assistance? Is it the capacity to build them out? Is it planning? Is it help engaging with area stakeholders and private landowners? But thoughts you have on kind of best practices in a way for communities that are looking to get into building out trails for the benefit of their residents and for visitors.
That could be a whole nother webinar in itself as well.
Many of these things,
considering we
yes.
have.
Yes.
I think just really quickly, it's all of those in many instances, and we've talked about it a lot. But how do you continue to get youth engaged and build that sense of stewardship and a little bit of pride and ownership, right? If they're going to be out there, how did they become engaged at an earlier age and helping out? But it's something I don't think I have an answer for totally, Mike, as far as the long-term sustainability of it. I feel it's often in the the build out tends to go well. It's the maintenance that often, that long-term maintenance, that becomes really a tough run for so many small groups.
I'd just echo that, what Carolann is saying about stewardship and maintenance. I think some things that come to mind, and I think we work in Vermont through trail organizations. There's numerous trail builders who come together in Vermont through the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. And, it is a big topic of conversation for us to think about best management practices and standardizing those a little bit more than they are currently. But I know when we talk to towns and municipalities about building trails, we start with our Department of Environmental Conservation and permits, so that encouraging communities to understand, what they need to know to put a trail on the ground, and starting from that place of permitting and getting the proper permits. But then that other layer, which I think we're kind of moving towards, is that best management practices, and bring those into one place for people to find.
So there are a few questions here related to trails. So I'm just going to stay on this theme a little bit. So one of the questions is referencing, again, appropriate increasing concerns about the environment, about global warming, again, pressure on the environment. And some of that spills over into trail work, making it, it's more expensive. To build a really proper, well-built, sustainable trail, it's more expensive than just kind of clearing some brush and making a path through the woods. Given that overall outdoor recreation has a relatively low impact on the environment, but there are some of these hurdles there. Do you have thoughts on what could be done to either subsidize or reduce costs and facilitate this growth of an improvement of the recreation question, again, in this context of sustainability and what we are seeing is increasing, in many places, increasing use?
Well, I think we're already seeing a lot in supporting the outdoor recreation infrastructure. And we're seeing outdoor recreation infrastructure definition used in many programs that promote funding. So that's a good thing. But, you kind of talked about a few different things in your question there. Climate's a big piece of what we need to be forward looking and thinking about, and how we're going to protect climate investments that we've made, and how we are going to trailblaze a path for new and innovative climate investments. And I think that's a really important piece of what we're going to be looking at in the future, especially with like our ski industries, right? We know that, crazy enough, they saw like in the state of New Hampshire last year, they saw 13% growth over the previous year, even though the months of January and February had relatively no snow. But March was a big snow month. But, it's just a reminder to us all, like how reliant we are on the climate for outdoor recreation, and that we need to be very mindful about protecting our investments there.
I would just add really quickly, thank you, Janel. That covered a lot in a short period, a short answer. But as I understand it, and I defer to my natural resource agency partners on this one probably, but as I understand it, a critical piece of sort of long-term sustainability, and it is the design and engineering. So often not to skip that step, because if you're really building the trail as it's intended to be used, and you think along that pathway of how much use it might be encountering, that design and engineering component is really important. And then, for us in Maine, like using someone like the Maine Conservation Corps as a way to bring in folks who have some experience and they're in a training program to continue to build sustainable trail systems.
One other question from the Q&A related to this kind of comes back to the in trails on private land, recognizing over time there are always new landowners coming into the region, both large and small, who may or may not feel a connection to, I think, what we sometimes take for granted in terms of this traditional, public access to private lands for recreation. Do you have thoughts in terms of related to the value or approaches to educating new landowners about this tradition and the public having access to lands? And again, this obviously there are small landowners who own key pieces of property that are important to this. There are larger landowners that might host larger numbers. So there's a scale here. But do you have thoughts on engagement of new landowners around this question?
Jump in. I think it's hugely important. It's something we talk about a lot in Vermont. We've seen a huge influx of new property owners, and considering that a lot of our recreation is on private lands, and we do have this tradition of opening up lands for recreation, I think it is really important that we be talking with new private landowners about, what that looks like, why it's important. I would say it's not something we're actively doing a lot of yet, but we do talk about it and are hopefully moving in that direction. And I know one thing we've talked about is why not get real estate agents on board, and maybe there are ways that we can work through creative pathways to reach new private property owners and start talking with them about the importance of this opportunity to provide outdoor recreation on their land.
Yeah, go ahead, Janel.
I've seen some great successes with just introductions and engagement. You have a trail group who has a stewardship team, and they reach out to this new landowner who most likely could be a new community member as well. So just that introduction into the community, into the outdoor recreation community, for them to understand that, hey, there's a trail that crosses across the back of your property, and this is what it means to us. And we would love for you to be able to give us permissions to continue using it and come to our next barbecue, right? Come to our next group ride. So that level of engagement, that you're, not just asking for something, you're giving something as well, is really important. You're building the value of your assets.
Great. So this next set of questions, again, we're talking a lot about the infrastructure, and I am watching the clock a little bit here. Carolann, you referenced the pillars that are incorporated as part through the confluence of states, one of those being community outdoor recreation programs. Can you speak a little bit to, I think this is a little bit different. It's less direct than people coming to the community and spending money on outdoor recreation, but the economic impact and value of community outdoor recreation programs as they're framed within the confluence.
Sorry, I'm hesitating because I'm trying to think through the pillars and where the community outdoor recreation programs fits. I think we may be thinking two sort of different things, but that's okay. So the community outdoor recreation programs piece, do you mean as a grant program, Mike? Sorry, you lost me on that one. As a grant program opportunity, or thinking more about, sort of the nonprofit organizations that help facilitate getting different people into the outdoors, whether it's different, underserved communities, whether it's BIPOC, whether it's just really working on providing that access to people who have traditionally not had access to the outdoors.
Yeah, I think the question, and thank you, Tenley, for clarifying in the Q&A. I think in particular, kind of the economic benefit and impact, and I think you alluded to this earlier, Carolann, of the health and wellness benefits.
Oh, right.
that
Okay.
come from community-based outdoor recreation programs.
Yeah. So I honestly, if it's someone in the Q&A, I apologize. I probably know very little about this. I just know that it's something that is really important. And in fact, this summer, I have an intern looking into this more specifically and what's happening around the state of Maine. But I do know, I believe it's Oregon and Washington State have done studies that have quantified the importance of having access to the outdoors and encouraging participation in outdoor recreation as a way to decrease health costs overall. But I mean, there is so much research. There's an incredible body of research that supports how important it is to just be in nature for physical and mental well-being. There's even research that supports the being in the outdoors, and in active could be as much as walking outdoors on a daily basis, and how that can even help educational attainment. So again, that early access to the outdoors, and any program, whether it's a school program or whether it's something inside the community, being able to introduce people at a young age and continue to keep them in the outdoors all the way through, sort of an aging population will distinctly, from research that's been done, show health benefits. Do I have a number I can provide? No, I'm sorry, but I know there's plenty of research out there that does support that.
Jackie, Janel, do you want anything to add on that? Not forcing you, but so again, this comes back to kind of this community level thinking around this. Actually, I'm going to ask this question first because I think I know the answer. One of the questions in the Q&A is workforce housing. It seems to be a big concern in many outdoor recreation areas. Has anyone found the ideal answer?
I would jump in and say no.
No? We're waiting with bated breath.
I mean, maybe that's what you were thinking, Mike, but I mean, it's something we talk about a lot in Vermont. I think it's something I've seen businesses in our state try and find creative solutions to. I think generally I've heard, it's hard as an outdoor business to then become a landlord. It's not an ideal situation. And I know at least in Vermont, our legislature just passed and the governor just signed a bill S-100, which amends some of the regulations that we have around development to allow for more housing development, more affordable housing development that meets, middle-class families and residents. So we are thinking about ways to start to remedy some of these challenges that people are facing, but there aren't good, great examples of successful projects yet, I would say. And correct me if I'm wrong, Janel and Carolann.
Well, it is a big topic again. We all and kind of whittling it down to specific to the outdoor recreation industry is a little tricky because it's a crisis across the whole country and everyone's dealing with it. So I think what I can say for the state of New Hampshire, that last week the legislature passed the state budget, and in that included Invest New Hampshire Housing, which will receive an additional 10 million for additional resources. 5 million will go to a housing champions program, and all this falls under the Invest New Hampshire program, and all that is about workforce housing. So that is the program we have on the ground right now throughout the state, and we, these housing's being built. It's great. It's happening. And, this conversation in 6 months, all of our states are going to have great projects to showcase and to tour you around and to show. It's going to just scratch the surface, honestly, though. This housing crisis wasn't created a year ago. It was created decades ago. So we got a lot of catch up to do. And I think that's really important to note, but it's on the top of everyone's agenda.
Yeah, and I was not expecting you all to have the answer. And just I think as many people know here, this is an issue the Northern Forest Center is acutely interested in it, in a space that we're working on. And we may have done webinars on this topic in the past, and even if we have, I expect that we will be convening further conversation on this in the future. So last question from the Q&A is, and this comes back again, kind of in the community realm and the workforce piece is, have you all been connecting with schools, particularly career technical education programs, to help bring some of the new ideas, new career opportunities? And that's, again, both from a product development standpoint, experience, entrepreneurship, to young people, so that they're more aware of workforce pathways into outdoor recreation.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a huge priority in the state of New Hampshire. Working with CTCs and the University of New Hampshire College of Health and Human Services on a collaborative efforts. But for example, we have Project Bike Tech going into our CTC programs. We've got 4 up and running in the state of New Hampshire. And this is what they refer to as a box curriculum program, where you can go in and you literally buy the curriculum, you get all top grade components, for your bike stations. And what it does, it's a conduit to teach core academics through a STEM program for students to become bike technicians. And they come out of this program certified and able to work. So, this is a great example, and it's one we're looking to duplicate, not only within the bike programming, but this type of curriculum can be duplicated and used in, say, marine. And, we need marine mechanics, that kind of component. So, it's a great template, and we're looking to grow this. We're looking to find additional funding for these kind of programs to support the CTCs and getting them up and running.
Great. Others?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. We're funding the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance to do work with our technical colleges and institutions to, I don't think similar or the same as what Janel is talking about in New Hampshire, but to develop curriculum that they can then use that's been created in partnership with outdoor businesses who have identified skill sets that are desirable. And it would be a curriculum that students can take. And once they graduate, they'd be eligible to work at these various businesses because they qualify for those jobs. And I know the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance is thinking a lot with us about, how do we develop those workforce pathways and where can we invest more funding to develop these opportunities.
And yeah, we've done something similar in partnership with Maine Outdoor Brands. We did a workforce needs assessment to start identifying in the next 5 to 10 years, even today, what are the needs going to look like now and into the future. And then we're finishing out an educational programs inventory across the state. So we know that our CTEs, there's a number of them that actually have outdoor leadership skills programs already in place. So we're trying to just get a full understanding of what's out there across the CTEs, the community college system, and the Maine system, as well as all the private institutions that are also in Maine. And then the other piece is looking at credentialing, apprenticeships, where the things that can be highest priority to start building those out. And as part of the Outdoor Economy Summit this year, we're actually going to be inviting a number of the CTE students along with others to join in the discussions that we'll be having. And so that's just trying to make those connections at this point. I have been part of the Maine Forest Collaborative Rural Aspirations program each year with the student cohorts that are generally high school age through the Northern Forest region, and in meeting with them and hearing more about the projects that they're working on and providing input on career opportunities in the outdoors. So there's a lot there to sort of pull together, but it's continued work that, again, I'd love to have another person that would totally focus on that, but it's definitely critically important to the advancement and growth of the industry and the economy.
That's great. So yeah, I think as we've seen through this conversation, this could be a very wide-ranging conversation as the outdoor recreation. This topic touches, again, we've talked about private land ownership, trail stewardship, visitor education, workforce, housing. So reiterating, I think, the value of having someone in your positions to really focus on these connections across all these different sectors. So I just want to bring us around and wrap things up on time here. And the last question I would ask each of you, just to give you a chance to talk for a moment on, is, do you want to share any specific initiatives that you're working on that you think are really exciting right now? And you may have touched on them already through the course of the conversation, but anything you want to really reiterate now? And also, I know a number of you are involved working on planning events for the fall. So kind of, this is your last minute to make a plug for anything particularly exciting that you're involved with right now, including events that you've got coming up.
I'll jump in. I mean, I'm excited about a lot of things happening in the Northern Forest region. I think particularly in Vermont, we have been putting a lot of energy into thinking through an update to our action plan. We, in 2018, identified a number of actions that we should work on to strengthen the outdoor recreation economy in Vermont. And we are getting ready to do an update to that action plan, as well as complete our statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, or it's also called SCORP. And we've been envisioning how SCORP can be a better tool for helping us track data on the ground about participation in outdoor recreation, and also help us identify places where we can put and make bigger impacts with funding. And with our action planning work, we're thinking about how can we leverage our relationships? How do we strengthen our partnerships and work towards a set of prioritized goals that help Vermont in the next 5 to 10 years really strengthen our outdoor recreation economy? And I won't take the floor from Carolann or Janel, but I know regionally, we're thinking a lot about these opportunities as well. And Mike, I know we're getting ready for a symposium in 2024, and I'm just very excited about all of the strategic planning work we're doing and opportunities that I see over the next 10 years.
Great. Janel, Carolann?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So similarly, we're all building our baseline for the outdoor recreation economies in our states. And last year, the Granite Outdoor Alliance, which is New Hampshire's outdoor rec business alliance, they did a workforce assessment. The ORD office is in the process of completing an outdoor industry inventory project, and then our SCORP will be updated in the fall. So with those 3 reports coming out, we're going to have our baseline, which really gives us a foundation to establish the work and connecting the outdoor recreation industry to businesses and communities. I would like to invite everyone to a whole bunch of stuff happening in New Hampshire this summer. And Isabella has a PDF she's going to drop in the chat. But With the Granite Outdoor Alliance, we have some fantastic networking events coming up. Last month, we kicked off with Wheels Down at Highland Mountain Bike Park, which was a huge blast. We had over 50 participants, many of them downhill mountain biking for the first time ever. And they came across all different sectors. We had banking and finance, we had energy people, we had, local trails people. It was really fantastic. So we have a series of events coming up, as you can see on the screen. And then the final one will be September 30th in Franconia, New Hampshire. It is the Graniteer. And this is an outdoor lifestyle event. And we're looking to really bring together the industry and build, again, this is going to be focused highly on workforce and all aspects of workforce and how we can build our volunteer communities, how we can get, employers in touch with the people they need to have showing up and helping them with their goals. So it's going to be a fantastic summer. Please join us. It'd be great to see you.
Carolann?
Just very quickly, inspired by the Forest Opportunity Roadmap in Maine that was developed a few years back now already, but still moving forward very, very impactfully. We will be launching an outdoor recreation economy roadmap, looking at best ways in the next 10 years to grow the outdoor recreation economy, looking at innovation, investment, workforce, and a number of the key areas that have already been discussed. So that's very exciting. And then I would just say the Maine Outdoor Economy Summit Year 2 will take place November 29th to December 1st. We will be at the Samoset in Rockport. So we're looking at 2.5 days almost at this point, or 2 days pretty much full on for workshops, panel discussions, networking, and some outdoor activities. So please join us there. That would be great. Maine Outdoor Economy Summit. And it's, I believe, the agenda and the notice that registration is open should be live in about a week or less.
Great. That's exciting. Well, just want to thank you all and all of our participants for joining this conversation and offering good questions and good thoughtful answers into this discussion. On following up on those last comments, I also want to share with everyone that the Northern Forest Center is working with all of our panelists here, as well as the state trade associations, folks from New York and other stakeholders, with support from the Northern Border Regional Commission, to organize and host a second outdoor recreation symposium, Northern Forest Regional Outdoor Recreation Symposium, just under a year from now. So May 14, 15, at the Mount Washington Omni Hotel in New Hampshire. We'll be hosting a two-day event, which will give us an opportunity to have a little more time than the hour and a half we had today, to dig into all these issues and opportunities in this space, in this outdoor recreation space. So I want to make a plug for that and encourage everyone to keep an eye out for future information about that event and to follow up with our panelists about events they have coming up this fall. Last couple of things, want to encourage everyone to take a moment to complete the evaluation, which I believe, if she hasn't, Isabella will put into the chat. You'll also receive a follow-up email with links to that and a recording of this webinar that you can share with others. Last piece, again, for those of you who look forward to these webinars, we are taking a little bit of a summer hiatus. We won't be doing webinars in July or August. Our next Northern Forest webinar will be in September, and it's be hosted by the Northern Forest Center's Forest Economy Program. And notably, the topic for this is the crossing paths of recreation and forest management. So a nice transition from this conversation into that conversation around private land ownership and how do we work across all these sectors to create economic opportunity in rural communities in the Northern Forest. So if to stay in the loop on these kinds of things, please feel free to subscribe to the Northern Forest Center's News Digest. If you don't, it's a great clearinghouse of news and information across the region on this and other related topics. And with that, I'll say offer a final thank you to our panelists and to Isabella Ronson and Joe Fox, who've been managing things behind the scenes here in an excellent way, and all of you for joining this conversation. So thank you all. Have a great day and enjoy the summer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay,
Bye.
great afternoon.